Thank you. You may be seated. On behalf of the Voke family, I want to say to everybody, thank you. Thank you for the messages. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the support. We know that there are so many people around the country and the world that are watching online. We want to greet those people too. And that as we walked into this church this morning and as people began to fill in, one just got a sense of a family. And that's really what Selborne is. Selborne is a family. Whether you've left the institution, you never leave the people and the love and the friendships that you have gained over the years. Doug would want me to tell Adam to switch his phone off because he might still try and give you a call. He loved these kinds of things where he could embarrass people. But there are two types of people in the world. There are those that live in a mold, that are governed by rules and regulations and people's perceptions. And then there are those who live outside of the mold. I don't think Doug ever lived inside a mold. I think in the 70 years that he was alive, he always pushed the buttons, pushed the boundaries, created friends, cherished those friends, looked after them and loved them. There were days when he would joke about me in a PTA meeting in front of the parents. And I would walk into his office and I would have a go at him and I'd say, Doug, geez, you can't do these kinds of things. And the first thing he would say, you'll miss me when I'm gone. How right he was. How right he was. Doug, living outside of the mold, was able to love people outside of the rules. And so many times when I'm confronted with issues and people were confronted with struggles and traumas, because he lived outside of the mold, he dealt with those things. He loved those things. He cherished those things. And he helped people deal with those things outside of the mold. To those that knew Doug, to those that allowed Doug inside of them, you will hear what I'm saying. Doug had one of the biggest hearts that you will have ever experienced. To those that never allowed Doug in and kept Doug at arm's length because he was outside of the mold, may I say that you missed out on a very special human being. You will miss me when I am gone. In Romans chapter 8, verse 10, it says, but if Christ is in you, though the body is dead because of sin, the spirit is life because of righteousness. If the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead and dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies, also through the Spirit that dwells in you. The breath of God that raised Jesus from the dead will raise us too. And that is what we are confronted with here today. In saying farewell to Doug, we are confronted with where we are with Jesus Christ. On that Friday, when Jesus went to the place of dead, when he went to the place of dry, bony places, the place called Calvary, the place called the skull, death thought it had won. On that Saturday morning, when I was in that hospital room, it seemed like death had won. There was emptiness. There was shallowness. There was despair. But as the time passed, I was confronted with a place where I experienced what love was about. To the Voke family, you gave us, as friends and family around you, an inkling what it means to be a family in love with each other. And we thank you for that. I want to say, Liz, Daryl, Gareth, Brian, family, the Bible doesn't give us an answer to this. All it says to us in 1 Thessalonians is, but I do not want you to be ignorant concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others who have no hope. We will grieve. No words can take away that grief. But today we celebrate Christ's reunion with Doug, whilst we lament his departure from us. We feel at peace that he is no longer suffering, whilst we cry aloud because the only for allowing us to have crossed his path, because our lives will never be the same. And so I invite us just to close our eyes and to just ask God to be with us this morning. Our Heavenly Father, we come into this place filled with mixed emotions. We come into this place knowing, Lord God, that death is the only certainty we have. We come seeking that your Holy Spirit would descend upon each and every person here. The person here today will know that they have been touched by this love. I pray, Father God, that you would be with each and every one of us in our own special way. That as we walk out of this, somebody that he respected immensely. And so Mr. Gunn is just going to lay for us the foundation of why we are here, celebrating the life of Mr. Doug Voke. Thank you, Mr. Gunn.
Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to start by saying to Liz and the family what an honor I deem this to be, to talk about such a wonderful, precious man. And before moving into any kind of celebratory mode, allow me to acknowledge the elephant in the room this morning. The fact that Doug's passing has generated a great deal of pain for his family, his many close friends, hundreds of colleagues, and thousands of those who were his pupils, now in their adulthood, who remember fondly the days when they called him Sir. My pain is born out of 17 years when we were privileged to jointly lead the great Selborne schools. And the many priceless moments we shared as co-leaders and friends. I can only imagine that the pain in my heart must be multiplied countless times in the hearts of those of his close personal friends, and especially in the hearts of the family. His beloved wife, Elizabeth, the three boys of whom he was so proud, Darryl, Gareth, Brian, and their partners, and his cherished grandchildren, Connor, Tori, Bailey, Georgia, and Mom, Zena, and sister, Glennis. May the happy memories of a warm, fun-filled man, your great love, your dad, your grandpa, help carry you through the difficult days as your emotions take time to heal. When I think about Doug, the dominant quality that explodes into my mind is that he was a man of passion, great passion. In the years that I knew him, that passion was focused pretty much exclusively on the Selborne schools. But what about his family? Shame, you may ask. And my answer would be, not to worry. His family was also Selborne. Liz, at the side of her man rooting for him and rooting for the black and white. These three boys, smart, proud, and successful in their black and white blazers. They were, the Vokes, a veritable mini Selborne. There's a corny cliche that goes, how do you know that a man went to Selborne? Answer, he'll tell you. Doug Voke never had to tell anyone that he went to Selborne. He simply oozed Selborne. Passion for the black and white is not an uncommon commodity among the boys as they pass through the portals of the school, nor among old boys as they fondly remember their days at the Selborne schools. If you could measure this passion, I'm sure that Doug would be found in the very top few of the Selborne men who love their school so. I believe that his extraordinary passion had its beginnings in 1966, when he was denied the opportunity to come up to the college, having completed his schooling at Selborne Primary. The reason was that his dad was transferred to Cape Town. In 1988, that dream that he had had became a dream opportunity when he was appointed as deputy headmaster to Selborne Primary. And then, in 1998, the opportunity of a lifetime presented itself as he was elevated to the headship of his best school in the world, Selborne Primary. It is a little wonder that he had passion in spades to drive him through the highly successful term of office that lasted 19 years. In my view, Doug's success as a headmaster rested on three pillars: the development of physical infrastructure, curricular and co-curricular growth, and on his positive qualities as an educator, manager, and person. These all combined to navigate Selborne Primary successfully into the 21st century. The completion of the multi-purpose centre, an indoor swimming pool, an IT centre, a music centre, much broadened the possibilities at the primary and were a source of great satisfaction to Doug. Never one to be complacent, Doug constantly sought ways to enhance the curricular and co-curricular programs. At the school, assisted by his staff, he oversaw many initiatives in this sphere. Sports tournaments were held, social outreach programs conducted, exchanges with English schools were developed and expanded, and significant strides were made in the field of information technology. Thirdly, a skim through the qualities of Doug Voke, the man, will help explain why he was such a successful educator and headmaster, and fondly regarded member of the wide circle of friends and colleagues. We have already touched on his passionate nature. He was also a warm, caring man, full of energy and fun. Ideal qualities for a primary school teacher. He was also a positive man. Other than ties and the education department, there was little that got him down. The Selborne schools were indeed fortunate that the 7th primary headmaster was an old school educator who stressed manners, respect, a rounded education, and a curriculum focus on the basics of English and mathematics, which laid such a strong foundation for the college to work on. The primary was also fortunate that Doug had the necessary skills to successfully manage a talented staff that had a wide range of interests and approaches to the art of educating young boys. The lads from the primary were certainly well equipped with sound cognitive building blocks and enough human breadth to cope easily with the final 5 years of schooling. Schools like Selborne put great stress on team sports in the belief that they do much to help prepare pupils for a life of human cooperation after school. They teach how to work in a group towards a common goal. They can achieve things together, and so on. Doug's great sporting passion was rugby. He himself was a six-club player in Cape Town, a Cheslin Colby type, I believe. On the small side, but fast and elusive, and often unpredictable, but always with the club colours close to his heart. My humble rugby career ended at school in Standard 9 as a fullback in the third team, a Lionel Wilson type, dependable and solid in defence, a very different player from dashing Doug. I wonder how many people in this gathering know who Lionel Wilson was. That's a long time ago. But if you know the man, you will know what I mean by solid and reliable. Well, these two players were brought together in 1998 to lead Team Selborne, and despite our different natures, we enjoyed a warm working relationship for 17 years when I came to value Doug as a highly supportive and enthusiastic teammate. When I said that Doug was passionate about Selborne, I must emphasize he was passionate about the whole Selborne. For him, it was just one school. My fondest memories of Doug are at rugby matches and on Founders' Days. He hardly ever missed a first 15 match, despite having had a full morning of matches at the primary. He would come onto the stand, sit fairly close by, and despite the noise of the crowd, we could often interchange little quips and comments. Thank goodness none of them reached the social media and simply went up into the ether. Founders' Days were very, very special days at both the primary and the college. Wonderful days of togetherness, when Doug and Liz would hit you with their full force of the warm hospitality at the primary, or their powerful support at the college. More often than not, the Vokes and the Guns would, with a few other hardy souls, be the last members of the main lunch table to leave after a meal of epic proportions, and feeling how fortunate we were to be at the grandest school in the world. Thank you, Doug, for your warm friendship and passionate support. The Selborne schools will be forever in your debt. Your race, enthusiastically run. We pray for your soul as it now rests with our Heavenly Father.
My journey to this funeral podium started some 7 years ago, where Doug called me into his office and told me that as his headmaster, I would do his funeral. And I wondered why, and it dawned on me this morning, because if I was doing the eulogy, I would tarnish his name. The days we spent peeing against the Selborne bus, the days we spent screaming at the ref because Connor Voke was the captain of the under-11 E team. We only had 4 teams, but he was the captain of the E team. But we swore at the ref, and he swore me blind. He said, Doug, Gareth, never tell the staff what I just did. This was a man that just seasoned everybody's life. But there's a saying, and I'm going to do things slightly unconventional, and I do apologize if this offends anybody in a church, and I really do. But the one thing that Doug asked me to promise is that I would acknowledge the role that his family played. And I will do that because he was so right. Mrs. Voke, he loved you. He really loved you. Con, Tori, when you look at the 3 sons he had, he was so relieved that finally he had something to be proud of. He loved you. You were the absolute apple of his eye. Bobby. What an incredible name to be called by each other. It was just so unique. To Brian, Daryl, Gareth, a father could never be prouder of the children that he had, what your dad was. He loved your wives, and Jackie was so proud of Jackie, the way she didn't just go and buy a car, but I remember him coming back and she did all the dirty work and looked at the Haval, and just such a clever young lady. To Liz, thank you for giving us Doug, because it wasn't hard. I think a lot of us on the inner circle knew that there were difficult days. You had to carry the struggles and the pain of what was going wrong. But you just, in your gracious, most beautiful way, supported a very, very powerful man. And you did it with such grace, with such ease, and with such love. And this is where I'm going to deviate. I'm going to ask us to stand, and just for 10 seconds, that we can all say thank you to this beautiful family. I'd like to lead us in a time of applause. So if you would stand with me, and let's acknowledge this incredible family as we pay tribute to Doug. Thank you to the Voke family for everything that you gave us in Doug. Thank you. Please be seated. Oh, please stand. Please stand. Be seated. Doug would enjoy that. We're going to join together as we sing a hymn or a song that the family have requested that we sing. I think the words are going to be up over there. And I invite us just to know that this was one of Doug's favorite songs. And as we sing it, let's sing it as a tribute, as a family, singing out to somebody whom we loved.
Lord, I come to you, let my heart be changed, renewed, flowing from the grace that I found in you. Lord, I've come to know the weaknesses I see in me will be stripped away by the power of your love. Hold me close, let
be seated. And call on Reese to lead us further.
I'm privileged to know Mr. Voke in many ways. He was a mentor, leader, the headmaster, the boss. He was a fellow Selbornian, and he was also our friend. An odd dynamic indeed. Saturday afternoon, touch rugby in Allenby Road on the Voke's lawn was a very indifferent weekend, but a potential call to the headmaster's office on Monday morning would still strike some fear. Mr. Voke, the headmaster and Selbornian. I made my way from pups to the college through the years 2001 to 2014, all through which time he was the primary headmaster. I've seen an innumerable number of messages and posts from Selbornians of my era, sharing their anecdotes about what Mr. Voke did for them. So much so, I can't imagine that Mr. Voke would remember many of these stories, but does speak to what he did for thousands of young men like me. We were taught to be polite, to be courteous, and to be gentlemen. We were taught to tackle low. At a tender age, we knew Mr. Voke to be fearless to defend what is right and to do what is right. An intercom call to the headmaster's office was fearing and respect demanding, but you left being treated fairly. All that being said, you were still more likely to be called to the office to show off some good work or show off a talent that your class teacher might have given a tip-off about. The same day would see Mr. Voke in his shorts bowling leg spinners to us in the nets, and the 2006 under 10A team were lucky enough to see one or two full-paced beamers. There was no homework on Fridays. We were encouraged to make friends and to play in team sports where all our differences were welcomed. This undoubtedly established the building blocks for the sense of camaraderie, brotherhood, and togetherness that we all feel so palpably in the Selborne and East London communities. Then Mr. Voke, our friend. When Mr. Voke blended into a first name. It's difficult to summarize so many years of friendship with the Pinots in one short go. From many, many, many weekends away and overseas trips with my parents. Trips literally up and down the entire country at the drop of a hat to support my dad's running. Holidays felt incomplete when the Vokes weren't around. I certainly was too small to remember such a time. Mr. and Mrs. Voke supported my mom and dad with my ailing grandparents and have always been giving of their time, love, support so eagerly. For someone with so much on his plate, the thought that he gave to us so freely of his time and energy is a void that we will always feel. His laugh, smile, fishing knots, and quiet whistling of Blueberry Hill is sorely, sorely missed. Mr. Voke took joy in Lloyd and I and loved us as his own, joining us on our journey through school and our careers. We too, like so many people here, feel we lost a family member. I want to read a short letter that Mr. Voke wrote for me when I was 17 or 18 years old, and they're words that I've held closely since. It reads, Reese, something to ponder. Enjoy the teen years while you still can. There will never again be a time in your life where a simple kiss means so much, or when an A+ means everything. Once you grow up, that all goes away. So enjoy being young and free while you still can. It's amazing how far you're willing to go when someone believes in you. We do. I hold Selborne very close to my heart, and I have no naivety to know that it would not have been the same without Mr. Voke. So I do take it on behalf of both my family and literally thousands of Selborne primary boys to say thank you. We did become gentlemen, and you can be proud.
I was teaching maths one day, and I was teaching I don't know, I've forgotten what you call them now, but where you go powers and indices and you know, I was teaching that one day, and it was very important to get the boys to understand that, and I got a knock on the door. There was Mr. Voke. I said, "Hello, sir." And I was very nervous. I thought I was being sort of tested, and looked up on. He said, "I got a problem. My friend Jeff is coming to visit, and my DSTV is not connected." I said, "And yes?" He said, "Well, you're going to my house, I'm going to look after your maths class, and you're going to fix the DSTV. I said, "I know nothing about it." He says, "You know more than I do." And so I went to the sports office, I got Mr. Govind, there was an Indian and a white oak, across the road, and off we went to fix Mr. Voke's TV because Jeff was coming. Well, 7 hours later, and some TV company that had been called, we got this thing to work. And of course, we had a few beers with Mr. Voke to say thank you, but we never told him about the 1,500 Rand that Mr. Govind and I had to pay so that Jeff could have DSTV. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this is because there is something very unique about Doug Voke. He had 3 friends longer than he was married. And to Miles, to Brian, and to Jeff, they shared a friendship that makes you understand the value of humanity. They shared a friendship that dates back years and years, decades. They shared a friendship that even though they were in different parts of the world, there was still something very special and unique. Now, we all know, is this being recorded? Is it live? We all know that Selborne Primary is far superior to Hudson, Sterling, and Ganubi. Must I repeat that again? We all know. And yet, because Miles was at Sterling, Brian was at Ganubi, he didn't really care about Hudson because Mr. Kennedy was there. There was a bond and a friendship that he was so intent on creating amongst the schools of East London. And for Doug, it was so important, those after drinks, after the matches, getting together, talking about the matches and whatever the situation, because that was the kind of person. And today, we are so privileged to have Miles and Brian share with us a little bit, because you can't. You cannot put into words today what this friendship actually means. But thank you for putting yourselves up for this, to just give us something of a very, very special friend and human being. So to Miles and Brian, and on behalf of Jeff, I welcome you and thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. It looks like we're going to sing a duet, but we're not going to. We're going to save you that.
He asked me to hold his hand.
Oops. Okay, you can have it if you want it. Okay, Gareth, I'm going to save you some trouble. You don't have to tarnish Doug's name. I'll do that for you. Okay. This is a time of sadness for all of us, for the families and for all his friends who are here. One of those, together with his family and a few other friends who happened to be with him in the last day or two that he was with us. And that was very special. On the last morning before he passed away, Sue and I were there, parts of the family, in fact the whole family, and I had a chance to actually get all the tubes aside and, get close to him. And I put my head next to his and I spoke to him. Now, I know some people say, do the people really understand? Can they hear you? We don't know that. But I had my last words with him. I had a few harsh words with him that he left us without asking permission. And then I made him a promise and I made myself a promise. I'm not going to mope about him leaving us. He did so much for us and he meant so much to us, and he's gone. I am going to celebrate from that day onwards, including today and forever, the amazing gift that he gave us, that special bond that he created in us. And I want to celebrate his love and his life with us because it meant so much. It will always mean so much. So, just a few points that I need to share because a lot of people wonder what we're all about. Gareth has sung our praises, which is wonderful. But we've known Doug, Miles and I and Jeff, and I was a bit perturbed when Gareth went and Jeff, he's only in Estonia, he hasn't gone yet. And there is a little message from him so that he was also here. But Miles and Jeff and I have known Doug for longer than any of you here, I think. I speak under correction, except, of course, for Mom, Granny Voke. He sat on the end of his bed and he said, I just wish that my wife would die and leave me in peace. She thought it was funny, we all thought it was funny, but that's the kind of guy he was, unpredictable and quirky. It's just like that. We spent a week at Gareth and Jax's house in Somerset West. Best week we've ever had, Sue and I, and just the two, Doug and Liv. The best thing ever. And Mrs. Voke, you'll recall you said something and we started laughing uncontrollably, and it was not fair because we were actually laughing at something you and Doug had said without you knowing about it. He asked you about your health and you said, I'm all right, Dougie, with your finger, I'm all right, Dougie, but sometimes my eyes water uncontrollably. And Doug, typical, sitting with these glasses on the end of his nose, looked and said, at least your pot plants must be happy. Yeah, when we met in Graafnet in 1973, that is a long time. It's if you take it to 18th when school starts, or round about there, it will be exactly 51 years ago. It's a half a century and a half. Unfortunately, Doug was trapped LBW, so he's out, but the rest of us are still batting for a while. It was Doug was a funny sort of guy. Cheslin Colby, I like the way that you said that, Gareth, because in many ways he was slightly lighter in color, but otherwise all the signs are there. Because he was quite full of himself, stocky guy, good looking, heads turned females when you walk past, a little snorricky, the guy from Cape Town. And he actually, we weren't sure about him because he played for False Bay and he played for Western Province. And then I spoke to his three boys the other day, and I said, did he really play for Western Province? And they said, no, he thinks he might have been on the bench for Western Province, which eventually made me think of the bomb squad. Doug, and he was there. He never got to run on, ever, but he was on the bench. He did play for Western Province B with great aplomb, scored some amazing Colby-type tries, which he really did, spectacular stuff. But now, in his first year, for some reason, Miles was playing hockey. Doug then decided to play hockey as well, and so that's where their friendship started. Miles and I were friends because we're both from the Stadtheim area, and Jeff and I in class had started a friendship, and suddenly we just got whoop, and we were just together, and that's where it was. Doug was so impressed with all the trouble we caused. He didn't quite put it in the words that we did. He just said, because he came from a very, this is Reverend Voke's son, you understand. So people caused trouble. It was calling, you caused dung. A nice acceptable word like cow dung. We caused a lot of dung. So when he went home after the first semester, he printed us, the four of us, sky blue t-shirts with the word Dungsim written in front, Dungsim 4, and we had numbers. I was 1 and then 2, 3, 4, as you'll hear later on in that little song that comes out. And but we said, why have you spelled it like that? He spelled D-U-N-G-S-U-M instead of D-U-N-G-S-O-M-E, a Dungsim. He said, well, my parents wouldn't sponsor this little episode, so I had to use my pocket money. And then when I got to the lettering, I ran out of money, so I had to cut the Dungsim short and just add S-U-M. And that's what we wore until Miles has still got his. Anyway, that's how it started. But, we did cause a lot of dung. It's just but fun dung. Okay. I mean, let's go, if you look at 1973, we were all born in 1953, and the stars just aligned because a litre of petrol was 53 cents, going to the drive-in or to movies was 53 cents per person, and a bottle of Autumn Harvest Crackling cost 53 cents a litre. And all those things just led to stories which I can't repeat, fortunately. But we split up in 1975 because that was the end of our 3-year stint there. Doug and I went to UCT to do a diploma in special class teaching. Miles stayed on at Graafnet to do a fourth year woodwork, and Jeff, bless his soul, did what we were meant to do. He went teaching and he got a post at Cambridge. I'm nearly done. There we go. Once you get onto the second page, you can see the end. So the Voke contingent and the Schwartz contingent were in the Western Cape. These other two were still border people. But we did have some times together, fun times. However, Doug was quick off the mark. He started the family first. And we were sitting at a lecture in psychology at UCT. And Liz had dropped him off at the place where I was boarding, and we'd gone up to UCT on his bike, which was parked permanently at my place, and then she went to the hospital because she had to check on the baby and all the rest of it. And while we were sitting in there, the secretary lady ran in and said to Mr. Mesk, who was our lecturer, and she whispered in his ear, and she said something, and he went like this, ah. And Doug said, my wife's been up to something, she's being silly now. That's all he said. My wife is being silly, I can just see it. She went in and Daryl had breached. I thought he was a whale, but he had breached. That's what And Douglas said, I told you. So when Mr. Mesk said, Mr. Voke, I jumped up first. Yeah, me. Oh, him. Douglas. And so he said, who is Mr. Voke, actually? So anyway, we both got onto the bicycle, rushed down to the Mowbray Maternity Hospital. I was sitting at the back. He was on the crossbar. And we lost control of the brakes because two big soles like that with two little brake blocks on the end ain't going to work. Through the rhododendrons, through all the flowers that when we got there in time. But things like that stick. And, you know, when these friends eventually came to Cape Town, we had other silly parties, but good things come to an end. In 1975, now it's 15 years after we had left college, separated but still close and friends. Doug applied for the post at Selborne Primary and got it. Miles had been promoted to as an HOD at Cambridge. I then applied to move to Cambridge and got a post there. It smacks of a bit of nepotism, but it gets done all the time now, so that doesn't really matter. And Jeff became the headmaster of College Street Primary. So once again, the foursome were united in one place. And things didn't cost 53 cents anymore, and that was a problem. Miles will tell you.
I think that deserves a round of applause. I used a bit of technology and typed mine up, which took me a couple of hours. But anyway, Brian, thanks for that intro. I'll try and pick up from where Brian left off. But just thanks to Liz for asking me to say a few words. It means a hell of a lot to me. Granny Zena, to see you here today, very special. And the Voke family, wonderful to be able to share this moment with you. All right, so our Dunxam bond remained very strong over the years, as Brian had indicated. And of course, once you've lived in the border area, you have this desire to return. And Brian already touched on the fact that he'd returned to the border area. And then, of course, the big news broke that Doug had accepted a post at Selborne Primary. This sent us sent shockwaves through the Dunxam, and of course we eagerly awaited the arrival of Doug. Unfortunately, I better follow my notes here. This is very special, but unfortunately Doug had to come up on his own, had to leave Liz and the boys in Cape Town to tie up a few loose ends, and Doug needed a place to stay. How it happened, I don't know whether it's the toss of a coin or whatever, but anyway, he landed up with Bev and I. What better than to have one of your best mates living with you? Not that I didn't enjoy living with Mommy, but you know, it took it to a new level. It gave you that opportunity to just have an extra beer or extra glass of wine every evening. Now Doug, of course, living with a guy and having him in your home, you get to know a slightly different part of him. He was a very fussy eater. I don't know if you actually knew that. So Doug didn't like gungy food. In fact, he used that. Don't mix things up. Don't give me sloppy food. Don't pour gravy all over it. He liked that he couldn't do. In fact, he was considered to be one of the best rugger and cricket coaches in the border area. and also a very respected under-9 rugby ref. And that takes some doing, because you not only have to manage the kids, but you've got to manage the parents as well. Doug was a devoted family man, and I fondly remember him and I often taking tours away to various parts of the country. And on 2 occasions, we took rugger-sides away to Cape Town. And he always insisted that we try and take our families with us. And I vividly remember my 2 daughters, Candace and Nicole, sitting in the back of the Selborne bus, clutching their bosoms and singing, "From the waters of Victoria." It is just very special. Doug and Liz eventually bought a house, 2 houses down, 2 doors away from us in Bamberg Road. And this led to many years of special friendship. Our children formed special friendship bonds for life, and the Voke boys at last had sisters, and the Dell girls eventually had brothers. This led to many evenings, of course, of entertainment by the gang. Daryl, Gareth, and Candace would play the senior roles, while poor Brian and Nicole had to play the lesser roles, example being a tree or a rock. Throughout our years of friendship, up to about 2010, we would annually gather for about 3 weeks of camping at Glen Eden Caravan Park. And I must say, this is when the sun used to still shine at Christmas time. If you were camping this last Christmas, you would know what I mean. In those early days, we were all up in East London, and Doug and Liz had to move up from Cape Town. And the one particular year, we're not sure whether they had all their camping equipment. I emphasize the word all, because when it came to setting up, suddenly the tent poles could not be found. And a tent, of course, is of very little use without poles. Anyway, these were eventually couriered up, and the holiday proceeded as it should. These holidays were very special in so many ways, with the highlights being the daily trips to the beach with all the kids piled onto the back of the bucky, beach games, fishing and catching very little, the Glen Eden tennis tournament, which I'll tell you a little bit about just now, and of course the evening braais. And of course at the end of each holiday, we'd have a prize giving based on the holiday's activities. And the shirt I'm wearing is the shirt Doug gave us as he was chairman of the Dunsum that year in 1996. And this is the shirt he gave us. Anyway, so one evening around the braai fire, Doug suggested that we should get up very early the next morning and go fishing. The fishing had been poorly that year, so we all agreed that we're getting up at the screech of dawn. It was about 4 o'clock when Doug came around rattling the cage. "Come on, guys, let's go, let's go, let's go." And we headed off down to the Glen Eden Point. I'm not following my notes again. Anyway, so we put on large pieces of bait and threw in here and threw in there, tried big hooks, small hooks, pull shit, you name it, nothing. Next minute, we see this guy coming along at the corner of our eye, short little guy with a small rod and a couple of lures. And Doug turns around and says, "I wonder if this oak knows what he's doing." Anyway, it wasn't long. This guy had landed a cob and then a kingfish and an assortment of other fish and made us look like absolute idiots. And he had all these fish swimming around the pool. So eventually we succumbed and went and chatted to him. He said, "No, guys, what you got to do for this kind of water over there, you use this kind of lure, and that deep blue water over there, you use this kind of lure." I said, "Okay, thanks, my pal." And of course, we rushed back to camp, had breakfast, and we rushed into town to go and buy an assortment of lures. Next morning, up early at the screech of dawn, same spot, same time, same place, same conditions, everything. Within an hour, every single lure was either attached to the bottom of the ocean or was still flying across the bay towards yellow sands, and not a single fish caught. Another disastrous fishing outing. While camping the one year, Doug started laying some blame, but I'm just wondering whether it wasn't anything to do with the beer. Anyway, the annual Glen Eden tennis tournaments were one of the highlights of the holidays. The one year, Doug and I teamed up And undoubtedly, one of our greatest achievements was an unexpected victory over a fancy doubles partner from Joburg. I had a reasonable serve, which, if it went in, could cause a bit of damage. But Doug was our secret weapon. Okay, his serves from the baseline would be cut and just make it over the net. So you'd have these guys charging in from the baseline, throwing their bodies at this ball, either hitting it into the net or playing it over the baseline. And because they're totally unpredictable. And when they did get it in, Doug would return it with one of these, and it would just make it over the net and then sort of bounce back towards us again. And we had them absolutely flummoxed. Needless to say, after an encounter of biblical proportion, Doug and I won the match, to tumultuous applause from all the folks seated on their deck chairs around the tennis court at Glen Eden. Never forget that one. Okay, fishing. Fishing and the desire to catch fish ran deep in Doug's veins. He loved spending money on equipment and fishing equipment, and he loved a visit to the fishing shop. He could consume fishing equipment like you can't believe. One day, we were eagerly heading off to go and fish, our rods proudly out the back window of his BMW, and we're reversing out the driveway. Next minute, crunch. His beautiful carbon fiber Butterworth rod caught a branch and snap in half. He was devastated. To coin a phrase, he hated himself. Remember that one, guys? The one day, we're heading out to the Pinkies farm to go and catch bass. And we all kitted out, and we all set off to the Pinkies farm. Had Liz and Bev in the back, the boys in the front, in these famous little BMW. The girls are complaining about the wind in the back. Dad said, no problem, don't worry, girls. Hits the electric window button. Little did he realize that our rods are out the back window. And, yep, well, you can guess what happens. Bzzz, crunch, 2 rods in their glory. This is the kind of thing that happened to Doug. He could just go through this fishing equipment like you can't believe. And this last one was an absolute classic. We're fishing on the Transkei at one of our annual fishing outings. And he's caught up, and he was performing what we call the Glen Eden Shuffle. Anyway, the sinker comes loose, and I'm standing up on a ledge, baiting up, and I can see the sinker coming back at him like a missile through the air. Doug's holding his rod up, and the sinker hits the rod slap. All the necessary safety equipment, life jackets, flares, etc., which you use when you're in distress, which we eventually discovered were all outdated, and a fancy two-way radio, which we never ever got to use. We just didn't know how to use it. We'd be far out in the ocean, and Doug would see a tanker coming past, and he'd switch on the radio. Tanker one, Sunbird, yeah, come in. We'd never get a response. Anyway, whilst we had fishing success, we enjoyed many a fishing outing and actually managed to catch fish. But on the one day, and this is a classic, we're fishing out near, and they stop some distance for us. Hey, you guys in the yellow rubber duck, what do you think you're doing? I said, no, don't worry, buddy, we're just fishing. You are in a reserve, it's a protected area. Anyway, I said, okay, sorry guys, sorry, we'll leave right now. But of course, we had all the fish we wanted. Last one. On another occasion, we tried our hand at trolling. And so we were trolling off the coast of the yellow sands. And we had the rods going out and the motors going zzzz, and the lures are out there. And next minute, this gannet. Now, a gannet is a lethal bird. You'll see them diving for the shoals of sardines when they come past. This gannet dives and hits Doug's lure and gets entangled with the lure. So, of course, Doug reels in. Now we've got a gannet flapping around in the boat. It's got a beak about that long. We've got a lure with treble hooks all around, and you've got the 2 pontoons of the rubber duck here, and we're just waiting for an accident to happen. Anyway, we managed to free the bird and the lure, and in goes the lure again. And about 5 minutes later, Doug's rod goes down again. Bang! Zzz, 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 zzz. Now we know this is a fish. Anyway, Doug is fighting the fish. He says, Miles, okay, slow down. Bro, go left, go right, and all this type of thing. Get the gaff ready. And we're reeling in. Next minute, Doug's reel explodes. Boah! And now there's just line all over the place. The fish is traveling. So we turn the boat around and we start chasing this fish, and Doug's pulling it in with a hand line. And eventually we get close enough, and with a gaff, we gaff this fish and bring it into the boat. It was our best and biggest fish ever. And we eventually bring this thing in, and was identified as an East Coast tuna. Ollie, does that sound right? Is there such a thing? Okay, Ollie says, yeah. Folks, I think I must finish now. Brian's saying, stop now, before you come out with something else that you shouldn't say. I'd like to just conclude by saying that Doug was a real friend. You could count on him any time of day or night. We will all miss him terribly, and that is why we are all here today, to say our last goodbyes. Doug, the Dunxam Four will never be the same, as only 3 of us remain. Lots of love, my dear friend. Tight lines, and until we meet again. And Brian's got a little snippet. He's going to be playing from Jeff from Estonia.
Hello to all. Jeff Scott here from snowy minus 21 degrees Estonia. I'm sure Miles and Brian have done a great job reporting on the Dunxam friendship. I received a message from Doug on Friday the 1st of December, just 3 weeks before his passing, and I thought it would be appropriate just to read to you the way this man was, and always was, and will always be in my mind. Hi, Jeffy. Lying watching a replay of some old Sevens final. So we'll have to leave 2 out. Get on with it, Jeffrey. And it's, oh yeah, Dunxam. 1, 3, 4. We're the Dunxam Four. Together forever. The Dunxam Four. Cheers, Doug. See you at Old Boys for a Castle.
What Miles and Brian and Jeff have shared with us today as parents, we need to thank God that our children turned out okay, if they went through education here in East London. I was introduced together with Adam. I think Dale was on that trip, Howie was on that trip. We went to Durban, and we had the privilege of Brian and Miles being with us. And we saw a glimpse in Brian and Miles of who Doug was and how he had rubbed off on them. Firstly, Miles caused trouble, hid the keys of the bus, kept them in his pocket. And you know, when Doug gets to that point where enough's enough, then it's time to go. And so we were on the B field at the Sharks. We just watched a test match. The late Alwyn didn't see a thing of that test match. Paulie Reeves and Andy were with us, and Doug wanted to go home. Eventually, he found the keys in Miles's pocket, which is the kind of thing Sterling people do. And Brian, the kind of things Ganubi people do, were just pouring drinks in the back of the bus. And Doug didn't care. He started the bus. He did a left turn or a right turn. Brian flew out the bus doors with his drink in his hand, was so chuffed that he hadn't spilled any of the cane. Miles was in the bus saying, Doug, you can't do this. Brian got up. He had to wear shorts to school for 6 months because those knees of his were so infected with the grass burn from the B field. And Doug just wanted to go home. And those are the memories that so many of us will have. And yes, they are outside of the mold for many people. But this is what made this human being so very, very special and very important to all of us. As I stood in that room on Saturday morning, one of the hardest things Gareth saying goodbye to his dad, Daryl looking out at the window, and Brian being the stalwart will be a privilege that I will remember for the rest of my life. I was taken to the valley of the dry bones, this Ezekiel 37, where God walks Ezekiel around the valley, and in that moment he shows him all the bones and the ribs and this whiteness, this colorless scene. And I was always reminded of verse 3 where God says, in the midst of all of that turmoil, he says, Son of man, can these bones live? And I went home and I walked and I just prayed, Son of man, can these bones live again? God tells Ezekiel to prophesy to those bones. He says, with the breath of God that comes into these bones, life will begin again. This is what today is. Daryl, Gareth, Brian, Liz. Today is about the Spirit of God coming in, blowing over a life that has touched so many of us. Today is about regeneration. Today is a day when we can look beyond death, where we look beyond death and we focus on the grace of God, the love that He put onto the cross of Calvary. It is a day when we let go of the worldly Doug and we focus, as Brian says, I am not going to mourn, but I'm going to celebrate